Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are looking into this model. So before I start into today's agenda of Kolb Learning Model, the implementation plan, before that I would like to highlight with a few notifications that, okay, why Learning Model, or what is the implementation plan, or why are we doing this? So let us start with basic three challenges in today's scenario as a LNOD professional. If you're a trainer, if you're a LNOD manager, if you're a LNOD head or a director who is willing to implement something. See, post-COVID, the business model has changed. Every business person, every business head, they're trying to look at a way of thinking how to create an impact. Now, pre-COVID, it was typically that, okay, if I do a program, I'm willing to wait for 9 months or 12 or 18 months or even sometime 24 months to find an impact, because those were scalable programs. Today, the biggest challenge that I have seen when I used to lead a team, when I used to handle a team, is that they're looking at an impact even after the first program or even after the entire start of the journey. During the Kolb Learning Model, I'll take a small example or where I've implemented Kolb Learning Model, just to give you another insight that to start the model, it took me 6 months. Why 6 months? Is because the ideation takes a longer time than the impact model. Because if you are not getting into an ideation mode, then what happens is at the end of the day, you will not be able to create a final plan. So let us start with an example so that we are there with the thought process. And then as the model goes along, we will be able to fit into the model which way we are able to look at the impact. Now, let's say you are a L&D manager or a L&D head, and you've been told by the CHRO or the CEO that I'm willing to implement a new learning program where I want to see an impact. Now, it can happen in any way. It can be a leadership journey, it can be a learning journey, it can be a talent journey. But in this case, we'll take it as where I did it was mostly from the perspective of new hiring. So every company where you're doing a new hiring, they typically have the hiring model. Then you have a day or two of typical of your induction plan. From there, you will train them for 10 days or 15 days or 21 days, depending upon which company you're working for. So the CEO and the CHRO says that at the end of the day, we will go ahead and plan a training program or a model which will give us an impact. Now, I've done this with one of the organizations that I've worked for, where I was heading the LNOD there. And that is the model we will try to follow through. And that is why I've chosen this topic, because this worked wonderfully well. Although Kolb Learning Model is easier to understand if you understand the basic 4 components, which I'll take you through. And it is also very difficult because you have to understand what you need to do. So based on that, I will tell you at every juncture what model works, what portion of the model works, what didn't work for me, or which I had to change based on my example. So that's the basic synopsis of today's Kolb Learning Model, the implementation plan, and we will take it from there as it goes. You can watch this video and you can put it in your implementation plan and come back to us by saying, this worked, this doesn't work, and then we can take it from there. So welcome once again to Kolb Learning Model, the implementation plan. Now, Kolb Learning Model, before I start, it's one of the part of the adult learning model. So basically the entire learning models are divided into 2 parts. One is the pedagogy, which is for child learning, and one is the andragogy, which is for the adult learning. Now, adult learning per se, it was created by a German educator called Mr. Knapp around 1880s or 1886, somewhere around there, or 1860s, mostly during this time. This 20 years was a phase when the educators was trying to find a new model which could work. So he coined the term adult learning, and based on that, he tried to develop something. Almost 60 years later, another educator who created or willing to work on that model in 1900 again worked on the adult learning model, but these 2 gentlemen did not create anything. Okay, so what happened was they were coming to a point where they wanted to find out what works, what don't work. And then came around 1960s, probably 1968, if I remember it correctly. The most important thing, Malcolm Knowles and Benjamin Bloom finally coined the term adult learning using Bloom's taxonomy and the other models, what they created. In that particular way, I think it took over almost around 120 odd years to finally come to that model. But it was still not Kolb who created. The first person to coin a term, which we'll talk in a separate video, is the Felder-Silverman model. And in the Felder-Silverman model, it was created from an engineering student perspective. But this was around 1986. So in 1984, David Kolb came up with this learning model after research with Jean Piaget, Dewey. They all started one. What is common across these people were the learner experience. How do we create a learner experience? What is the learner thought process? How do I gain more advantage of the learner experience? So this is what base the model is all about. Now, if I talk about the Kolb learning model, the thought process is very simple. The thought process is Kolb's learning model is divided into 4 dimensions, 4 stages, or whatever you can call it. So the first is concrete experience. Second is reflective observation. Third is abstract conceptualization. And fourth is active experimentation. Now, if you think of these 4 stages, can you work it in an isolation? The answer is no, because it's a cycle. What Kolb says that, when you're creating this kind of a model, it has to be a universal cycle that goes on. So for example, what is concrete experience? See, concrete experience is something which involves a first-hand experience, a direct experience. So for example, you're doing a training program, you're engaging them in activities that provides all those practical experiences. You get into that kind of a node where you did a role play. So what is the outcome of the role play? Or say you did a small business simulation activity. So that is concrete experience. So that means you do an activity, or you do a role play, or you do a game, or you do a business simulation. And from that particular simulation, what is the experience that your learners are gathering? That's what he defines as concrete experience. Although the book defines in a very learned way, in a very proper definitive way, but I'm trying to keep it very simple for your understanding. So whatever program you're doing as a facilitation, and from there, when you're getting into that role of a facilitator and what the activities you're doing, that is providing you a direct or practical experience. Second comes your reflective observation. Now, what is this reflective observation? Now, in this stage, the learners, the trainees, or your batchmates, they reflect on their experiences, observing and analyzing them to gain insights. One of the best example I can quote is you have done a role play. Post the role play, you ask the question, what happened? Or what did you learn from it? Or what are you looking at? Or what is the learning that you take from this activity? So what you're asking them is, after the concrete experience, you're asking them to reflect on that activity that they've just conducted or just finished. And then you're asking them that what are your observations? So those are the series of questions that happens. So I did an activity. I make them realize, okay, this is what actually happens. And from there, you're asking them for a reflective observation. Now, in this reflective observation, you have to also understand that the way you design the program. So for example, if you're doing a leadership workshop, now I can start with an assessment. So assessment becomes the concrete experience. From the concrete experience, I'm able to get into reflective observation. When I say reflective observation, what it means is that after the assessment, what is my style? If I'm doing a psychometric evaluation, so after the assessment, what do I take out from this? What is the insight? What is my personality? What does it mean? So concrete experience and reflective observation on that way. The next model is more like an abstract conceptualization. Now here you have said, now this is where you ask the question, okay, what is your reflection on the activity? Or what do you think, or how would you go ahead and apply, or how do you reflect on this on a structured idea? So here learners typically develop theories and concepts based on their reflections. So one of the biggest thing that comes out is as a thought process in the programs that we do is, you know what, Gabriel, you changed my insight. I knew this thing could have been done, but now I'm getting a new thought process, which is talking about that I can use this in this way. I will give you an example. In one of the interviewing skills workshops, I used this Kolb learning model, and it was for the HODs. And we were doing the workshop in a typical discussion mode. So there was no PPTs, only role plays, actionable simulations, and we did the STAR method, which is the situation, task, action, and results. Now, one of the HOD, after the activity was over, he stood up and said, Gabriel, initially I was having this notion that STAR can be used in sharing success formulas or sharing information or sharing what needs to be done. And I gave him the answer, you're absolutely right. Now what? He came up with a beautiful idea that, what, Gabriel, I'm going to now use this not only in interviewing skills, also to create something new where I can use it. So that's the abstract conceptualization that happens. Because when you're forming structured ideas, see, what is our intention of a program? That at the end of the day, these people who are there in your workshop, they go back, they create their own way of doing things, and from that basis, they create the idea or a structured idea or a reflection on the learning, which creates another way of doing things. So for example, if you think from this perspective, you're doing a leadership workshop and you are using the situational leadership model 1, which is created by Dr. Paul Hershey, Kenneth Blanchard, and John Dewey. In that particular workshop, we have just completed their assessment. After the assessment, you're telling them, okay, this is the style. If you have a mixed bag of style, now you throw them the question, okay, what is your reflection on this? So they will come and ask you, am I right? Am I wrong? Or am I doing this rightly? Am I doing this in a wrong way? What you're doing is you're giving them the ideological thought process after that activity. So they experience the assessment, which is concrete experience. Once they experienced all about it, they went into a reflective observation. In the reflective observation, they understood, okay, this is what I am, this is what I can do, this is what I cannot do, this is what I need to understand, and then they're creating their own theories. They're creating their own concept. That is your abstract conceptualization. From there, you now come to the end of the program where you're saying, okay, this is the final stage, which is active experimentation. You remember we asked them to fill up an action plan, or we asked them to do start, stop, and continue. What will you start doing? What will you stop doing? And what will you continue doing? Or we asked them a 3-month plan where, whatever you have learned, how will you go ahead and technically implement those learnings in that model? Will get into that kind of an activity. So ideologically, you did a program, you delivered a program, is your concrete experience. During the program, you ask them to go through certain activities, assessments, role plays, simulation. That is your reflective observation. From that experience and reflective observation, you create your own plan to implement, you create your own concept to implement based on the actual model, forming new ideas. That is your abstract conceptualization. And now you're asking them to write an action plan, which will be the applying the new theories to the real world situation. It's trial and testing and refining them. That is your active experimentation. So always remember, Kolb model is a cycle. It doesn't end at active experimentation. It goes on. So after the active experimentation, if you are creating a journey, if you go back, you will ask, okay, what were implemented, what were not implemented. I'll give you one more thing. I was doing a leadership excellence for General Motors, and they were looking at a journey of 9 months. Basically, their thought process was they wanted to have 10 to 12% of that entire force that will come to the learning journey should get promoted after 9 months. Ideally, that's what the thought process. Now, we were looking at 12% or 10%. So the total employee base that we covered was around 150. So if I take a 10% or a 12%, we're looking at around 15 to 18 people to get promoted. I used the Kolb learning model there, but it was the other way around. We started with active experimentation. So we went backwards. So for example, what will happen in the workshop? How will the action plan be created? What will be the stages? But we never delivered the workshop 3 days at a row. We delivered the workshop in a way, week 1, day 1, Then week 3, day 2, then week 5, day 3. Now, if you look at the gaps, it's almost for 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, we created something as an action plan. So after the workshop, if this is the action plan, they will go back to their managers or their leaders and they'll start evaluating what they are implementing. So if I did a time management workshop and their problem was people were not coming on time, they will try to find a ratio between how many people were not coming on time and after the workshop, what is their timeline. So that's we started from active experimentation. Based on that, we went to concrete experience. So we sat down and we designed a workshop based on the competencies that GM has. Now, GM has a very big competency list because they are a global organization. Now, in that concrete experience, we said we will focus on topics based on role plays, based on activities, gamification, and simulation. So the entire 8 hours of program actually went into 4 groups. So group 1 on the day of the facilitation will go through this activity for time management. So all the batches, they go through the time management activity in that way. So activity, reflection, which is your reflective observation. That means you're using concrete experience and then you're using reflective observation. Post that, we gave them a blank sheet and said, okay, how will you implement this idea? What is the new idea that has come up? So 2 questions, once again, abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. In that way, they created up with something new and they filled up their action plan. So once that was over, they had 2 weeks for implementation time. So we had a again meeting with their managers, with their leaders, and based on that fact, we went ahead in understanding how can these people implement. So they started giving them work based on the action plan. So active experimentation became a very final point. And in all these things, where do we fit in? So it's a business who is implementing, it is the plant who is applying, it is the other people who are applying. What are we there for? We are the administrator for the entire project. We are there to get into that, getting out of that monologue and creating a dialogue between all these people. So here, if you see, there is a triangle. On one side of the triangle, it is you. On one arm of the triangle. So the base is you, where you're creating the entire model. On the one side of the triangle, it is your participants or the learners. And your one side is business. That is the triangle you have to fit in. And outside that triangle, so if you see, if I do this triangle, this is the base. So this is the learning manager or the trainer or the facilitator. On the left side, it is the learner. On the right side, it is the business. And in this triangle, I draw the entire circle of the 4 stages of Kolb learning model: the concrete experience, the reflective observation, the abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. And for each and every places, we designed. So for active experimentation, what will be the format of the action plan? How are we going to implement it? Who will review it? What is the period of reviewing? Okay, if some people are able to implement. So I'll tell you, after the first 2 batches, the implementation was only at 10%. So if you have completed 50 people, so only 5 or 6 people were able to implement. So we did a hard stop there. And we again back to the drawing board and storyboard, and we start looking at whether the format was too heavy, whether the format was not able to be applied, or whether it's the human psychology that is creating a resistance. And we created a simple action plan. So see, it's not like that you create a journey and you go ahead at the end of the program and you wait there to happen. You can even break down the journey after the active experimentation. So I hope you're clear with the 4 things and you are able to think through. Now, once you've known these 4 models, we get into the corporate training. Now, why would you use Kolb? I mean, you have to understand, you have to get into the nitty-gritty of all these things put together. You today, when the entire corporate training is looking at an example of creating that factorate of what is the impact? Is this impact? What can we do? How can we do? What we cannot do? What can we implement? So all these things put together, when we look at Kolb's modeling corporate training perspective or a facilitator point of view or a learning department point of view, the first is your engagement is enhanced to a very, very primary level. Why? Because you're promoting active participation. You're making learner more engaged. You're making learning more relevant. So for example, I can use X model for Y learners. I can use the same X model for Z learners. However, having said that, my application changes. So the experimentation and that engaging model changes, and it gets into the habit of active participation. So people will come to your workshop. It's not that you have to call them, you have to get them. Recently, I had an opportunity to go ahead and implement an interviewing skills workshop. We named it Effective Interviewing Skills Workshop. Now, when we had the discussion as to how do we go about it, what are the things that we do, and because it was all for the C-suite level, because they hire the top level in their company, what we did was, again, we went back to the storyboard and we said, why are you doing this program? I mean, what is your need? If you're saying their C-suite, their knowledge of interviewing skills would be much, much higher than a normal managerial position. So they said, Gabriel, they know. It's not the question is they don't know. They are implementing it, but we want to structure it. Now, please understand, they know, they are implementing, but they're unable to structure it. So that means in my active experimentation, what I need to think about in their action plan is how they can create a structure of the interview. Not from a perspective of, okay, I have to teach them what is an interview, what is the cost of a bad hire, what happens when a person leaves the organization, okay, how do I find more people? If I'm unable to get it through, if I have to get into a panel interview, then how do I cope up with that panel interview? So all things put together comes to the point of discussion that whether there is a structure or not. If there is no structure, then they are the best. So what we did was we went from a typical of starting from the abstract conceptualization. Okay, what they know, what they're implementing, have they gone through any kind of training before? Are they certified? Are they going to online to know more? Are they going to Google or using Chat GPT to find out questions of interviewers? So that is where we came to understand that they never have used any other tools to create questions. They typically walk into an interview room and, okay, I am hiring for an L&D manager. Okay, these are the competencies, and start asking questions. So now you understand that we are now creating a proper structure to the entire model. So what we did, the entire workshop was designed in such a way that their concrete experience changes. I can't go ahead and tell them that, this is what is interview, this is what people speak about the definitions of interview. We went into a complete discussion mode. Why? Because I want to create a very high on that concrete experience. From that concrete experience, we gave them a timeline to write what were they doing in their current interviews and what they want to do in the interviews after the program. So we called them for a reflective observation, what they're thinking, as well as your abstract conceptualization. So I used both the models together in the workshop itself. And then they created a new one. They created a new way of using the STAR method. So you look at this, it promotes active participation. It is making learner more relevant, learning more relevant and engaging for employees. So that's the first one. Second is, it is adaptable to multiple learning styles. Now, if I think from a perspective, what kind of learning styles are we looking at? So somebody are visual learners, somebody are auditory learners, somebody are kinesthetic learners, and somebody are reading and writing learners or writing learners. So it's VARK. So, or VAK. Now, if you look at that, because we went to a discussion mode, so auditory happened, and because in your discussion, you're allowing the fellow participants to speak. So that means visual is also there. In the same way, we ask them to write down what questions will they ask for A set of interview, for B set of interview, for C set of interview. By doing that and by kinesthetics, they created an n number of questions in there. So it is very, very adaptable to the learning styles, and it allows the facilitators to cater to different learning styles and all at the same level. And that is how the employees benefit from the training. The other part is, after the program, one of the person was the chief technology officer of the company, came up to me and said, Gabriel, I used to use STAR method for a different purpose. I mean, I used it for interview, but I used it for a different purpose. Now you have given me a better perspective and a better methodology to implement. That's an improved performance. It's then and there. And it creates a better job satisfaction for the people. Everybody at the end of the day, this is I typically do from a abstract conceptualization and active experimentation, is what will you implement? How will you implement? And why will you implement? So it's a what, how, and why method. So they were very clear, Gabriel, and they took only one. So some people took STAR as a method. Some people said the way of questioning. And after this all was over, I took them back to concrete experience, opened up ChatGPT and showed them the hard work that they did, how they can lead it to the ChatGPT. However, during that concrete experience, one of the participants came up to me and said, Gabriel, if we can do it from ChatGPT, why did you take this hard way to let us have to write it down? I mean, don't you think we are wasting our time? You know what my answer was? My answer, think about it. What will you answer as a facilitator? I used abstract conceptualization and reflective observation. So I told them very clearly that, at the end of the day, yeah, you are right. You will save time. You will get into all these methodologies. You will get into understanding everything. But at the end of the day, who will validate which question to ask? Who will create that set of questions that is about to ask? Because at the end of the day, if you hire a bad hire, you will be the person who is questioned. So then he said, okay, Gabriel, I understood. So you want me to create a balance. You want me to create the set of questions and then validate with ChatGPT. So that means the question becomes absolutely foolproof. You see, active experimentation. They create their action plan then and there. So using the Kolb model in corporate training, it also leads to improved performance then and there and on a greater job satisfaction. Now, let us talk about the Kolb's framework. Because if you understand what is Kolb's model, if you understand with few examples, as I said, I will actually show you how did I implement the entire model in one of the practice sessions that we'll do. But let us understand the Kolb framework. Now, if you look at the screen now, I have displayed in front of you step 1. How would you define a learning objective? Think about it. Leadership Development Program, LDP. Management Development Program. Learning journeys, hiring programs, behavioral interview programs, succession planning programs, capability building programs. So how do you define the learning objectives? So again, going back to those 4 stages, concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experiment. So think, where would they implement the learning, the active experiment part from the back way? So if I know that, okay, this is where they're going to implement, then if this is what they're going to implement, then I can use that as my objective to clear outcomes. So use every stage to create what kind of experience they will go through, what kind of conceptualization they will go through. That is the encouraged idea. Once you're done with the learning objectives, then look for experience. Because as I said it before in the opening of this session, that people are looking for learner experience. The biggest ticket or the biggest takeaway of an adult learning model is the learner's experience. Whether it is Felder-Silverman model, whether it is Bloom's taxonomy, whether it is Malcolm Knowles model, whether it is Kolb model, whether it is any other model, they all talk about the learner experience. So when I'm looking for learner experience, so what kind of simulations shall I use? What are the role plays will I do? What are the real world projects that I can do? Now, real world projects cannot be implemented in a 2-day workshop or a 3-day workshop. You can create caselets or you can create case snippets which will help you in that way. Otherwise, you don't. If you're using a learning journey, then look at those real world projects. So in a lot of MBA programs today, there is a word you can see, capstone projects. You can create your own capstone project based on this. Because you're looking at the experience. Then comes your facilitation reflection. So when you're completing the workshop, what will they do after that? You can create a group, you can create a structured journaling feedback loop, you can go for group reviews. In one of the places, I was not part of the facilitation or the design, but because my team was doing it, we created a group. It was a first time leadership program for a big travel company in India, which they operate around the globe. And what we said was, we'll create a group where every Friday, one of the topics that you learned there will be given to you with an implementation plan. Now, you have to implement the same in the next 10 days or 15 days. You decide on the timeline and you let us know what is happening. So we created those feedback loops. Okay. We created a structured journaling. For example, okay, I implemented model A. Model A gives me this kind of reflection, or this is my active experience is all about. People are unable to do it. That way, we are not only creating that application, but it is getting into a proper connotation of a guide. And then once in a month after the program, we used to do group reviews. Okay, what worked, what didn't work, what went well, what could have been better, that way. Now, if you look at this, we not even have spoken about the main model of the topic that we're going to display. We're talking about the learning objectives, the experience that the learner will go through, and how can I facilitate the reflection of the learning. Once you have done these things, now you get into the conceptualization. Now, if I again take you through the previous slide, so what did you do? You created an active experimentation thought. From active experimentation thought, you went back to concrete experience, designing learner experience. From concrete experience, you went to reflective observation, what will work, what will not work, and now you're coming back to your abstract conceptualization. What learning map will you use? What are the models? What are the theory to practice discussion will happen? What are the encourage experimentation will happen? What are the action plans? What are the pilot projects? What will you do? So see how you are implementing it in one go, in one simple theory of that singular model activity. And that is how the entire thing gets into an execution. Whether you do a single program, whether you do multiple programs, when you do a single journey, you do a 2-year-long journey, all these things implement together it out here. Now, as we say this as the framework of, going by defining learning objectives, designing for experience, facilitating the reflection, guiding the conceptualization, and encouraging experimentation, it leads to how do I align with the learning formats? What do I do that it gets into the alignment of the learning formats? Now, what you see now on the screen is a table. So I've created a learning journey, right? And in the learning journey, what I did was the idea of a program or a journey. So if my learning format is micro learning, what stage am I aligned to? Abstract conceptualization. An example is quick theory, bites or summaries. So like say 5 learning. So let's say leadership learning, leadership style. What will you implement? How will you implement? What are the factors? So quick theory, bites and summaries. If you're doing mobile learning, it is talking about active experimentation. So on the go scenario applications, they can directly get in those apps and give a direct way of doing things. Coaching and mentoring, it's a reflective observation, experience sharing, feedback, and during the workshop, facilitating workshop, role plays, it's the concrete experience. It is in-person simulation. So see, again, from concrete experience to reflective observation to abstract conceptualization and active experimentation, you're using it in a cycle. So ideally, this is one way of looking at learning formats. You can create your own learning format based on this. How you want to go ahead and do this is completely up to you. That's how the best the model is. And the success of the Kolb model can be gauged into the metric of it. So knowledge retention, percentage improvement in post-training assessments, engagement rate, participation and feedback scores, behavior change, observable performance impact, and experimentation initiatives, number of pilots and action plan launched. So success is multifold. So the knowledge retention can happen in pre and post training assessments. The engagement rate can be decided from a participation and the feedback scores. The behavioral change can happen over a period of time where you can create an action plan of observable performance impact, and the experiment initiatives can happen with multiple pilots and action plans launched. So based on all these things, what we think about is, let us go ahead now. Let me take you through a journey of when I used the Kolb learning model as a live model and how did I go about it. I'll give you numbers. I can't share with you the master data because since I did it with an organization, the number and the data is very legal to the organization. But I'll give you how did it come to me, what were the factors I discussed, or how many team meetings we did, and so on and so forth. So this is what the theoretical part was all about. And now we'll get into the practice part. All right. So we did speak about the success pattern. We did speak about the Kolb learning model. We did speak about the entire architecture as active experience, active experimentation, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and concrete experience. Now, let us go ahead and take you through a learning journey. Now, the first point is, I was given this line, so I'm going to read it out in front of you. So, need to create a new hire training program with impact and reduce attrition and impact measurement. So, that was the idea of, getting into that. When I did a check of new hire training, which was there for 8 weeks, 25 per batch, no review mechanism. Now, what I'm going to draw on board is currently, if you try to tend this on board, is if I look in this way, I'm going to draw a kind of a 4x4 matrix as of now. And from that perspective, if you look at that, I have a program which goes on for 8 weeks. From there, now these are what we have on the right hand side. On the left hand side, if you see, there is no review, and there was an impact measurement, but end of the day they were looking from typically a feedback scores. So if I may put it in this way, we are looking from a feedback. Now, if you look at this 4x4 matrix, this is what we have right now. Now, I was told that we need to change this thought process. We need to create a program which will give us an impact. And if I take you through, their core challenge was to reduce attrition. So 0 to 90 days or 0 to 120 days, in this period, when you're looking at all these things, they're also looking at to reduce attrition. I mean, that's the way I can put it through. So what we thought about, we spoke about, and we will take it through the correct measurement. So let us first try and understand what did we do rather than what we did. So what did we do was we created when I say a focused group, a focused group had two basic differences: POC from business and POC from the L&D. Now, if you look at the understanding of this, the idea, the genesis of this is that this POCs will kind of act as a point of contact in all the discussions, creating the minutes of the meetings, creating an identification of what we intended to do, how will you do it. So if I can put it as a phased-wise fashion, so the first thing what we did was we created a MOM format. When I say an MOM format, what I'm trying to tell you is that whatever is said has to be recorded, whether by business, whether by any other people, and whatever it is. We have not even gone into any of the Kolb model. So after the MOM format, what we did was we created a review format. Now this review format is not from a program perspective, but from our. So you see there is a POC in business and there is a POC of L&D. Their job would be to come together from an MOM format when we were supposed to publish it all around all the stakeholders, and there is to be a review format. Now these two are the basic first mechanism. So this is pre-Kolb model. This is what I did. And based on all these things, what we did was after this, we came into an understanding of whether we want to go for a new program or modifying the existing program. So ideally, that was the discussion initially all about, and that's what we intended to do. Now, once this was over, so this is typically, if I can put a timeline to this, this took us almost 45 days. Almost 45 days, in the sense that we had a discussion with the chief business officer, we had a discussion with all the business heads, the stakeholders, we had a meeting with HR director, because we were doing, or we were supposed to do an impact measurement during the program, not only after the program, plus their deployment, because they were new hire trainings. Now in all these discussions, what came out as a core thing, one, we have something called as trainer scorecard. Now what will happen in a trainer scorecard? It's very simple. In a trainer scorecard, we'll go ahead and we'll get into the activity of their ranking system kind of. So what they're doing, their feedback scores, their thought process wise scores, their subject matter expert scores, their continuous development thought of things. So that's a trainer scoreboard. The second point, what we came up with from there was typically a learner scoreboard or scorecard, whichever you want to call it. Now this learner scorecard will speak about their attendance, their pre and post subject matter scores, their participation scores. Now trainer will have an observation score for them, and most importantly their target versus actual score. Now this combined together, we created something called as the training report. So the main function of the training report is very simple. Two things mostly, trainer scorecard and learner scorecard. And publication date we all discussed after a late period of time. We thought about it. We also had an idea that, going forward, if this can become a process, but that's a far-fetched thing as of now. We are looking from a perspective of designing something based on the Kolb model. Now, are we clear till this far? Let me do a quick recap of what we said. So if you see, the directive was need to create a new hire training program with impact. The main two model was reduce attrition, impact measurement. The current state of the factors, there was a new hire training for 8 weeks, 25 per batch. There was no review mechanism. So we created a 2x2 matrix. On the one side, we had a program for 8 weeks. We only had feedback, but there was no review mechanism or impact measurement. So to reduce attrition, we created a focus group. In that focus group, there were two POCs. One POC is from the business and one POC is from the L&D, where we created three things. One, what is the MOM format? What will be happening? What we'll be discussing? Second is the review format, not for the program, but for the overall agenda basis. And then whether you should go for a new program or we should modify the existing program. And this entire thing with the trainer scorecard, learner scorecard, the training report format all took us 45 days. So if I take today's date or if I take 1st July, so till the 15th of August, my days are gone in getting all these things right. Now, once we had the meeting, now this is a very key point, and please look at what I'm trying to write and you will get to understand of all these things. So what we did was we created a project timeline, right? Now, if you look at this timeline, on one side, we decided the launch of this program. When will we do the launch, or what was the month or date? Then we discussed the review dates. So the review dates will be during the program, after the program, prior to the program. Business will come in, only L&D team will do it. Then the third point was target. So every person who comes to the new hire training, after a certain amount of time, they will go to the target mechanism. So what is the target, how much to achieve? Then we said, okay, if that is fine, and they already had an existing program where they're supposed to do 4 hours of classroom training or virtual training, and then 4 hours of practical session. So we kept as it is. So I will use the word program as it is. That's how I'm going to keep it as of now. Then we created a business review. What will happen in business review? Business, so if you remember what I said initially, the two POCs will come together from business as well as the L&D team, and they will go ahead and discuss what is going well, what is not going well, what did we have, and all these things. And finally, and I'm going to do a cross section out here, we spoke on impact measure. What will the impact be? And then we also created an R&R, rewards and recognition, kind of a graduation or certification. So if you look at this timeline, I mean, if you look at this project map, we fixed with the launch date, we went into review, we went under a target, we called the program will keep as it is. We have not yet discussed what will be the go with the timeline. Then we said we'll have a business review with both the POCs, and then we'll look at impact measure as well as R&R. Now, based on this timeline, so guys, what do you think, which model we are looking at as of now? Yeah, you guessed it right. We are looking at active experimentation. So that means we started with the back first, and then we went to this. So in active experiment, what did we decide to do? One, we created learning objectives. So when you say we created learning objectives, we said this will be a set practice. Okay, I can't share you much more because it depends on the organization, and because we signed an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't go ahead and say all the data. But very simple, what is that we are looking at? We also set a benchmark score. So for your knowledge, this is what will be the score. For your participation, this is what will score. For your floor buddy, this will be your score, and then overall score. So for every model, we created a score, and based on that, the learner scorecard will happen. So we created a learning objectives. Then we went to learner experience design. What will this do? What kind of role plays will we do? What kind of identification we'll have? What kind of models will we use? If you're looking at a learning model, then what kind of learning model would we use? What kind of facilitation thought process will we use? And the entire thing. And finally, we spoke about the training methodology. What it means that how the facilitation will happen. So we started with active experimentation, and in this training methodology we also created program design, we created an activity list, we created as a target format. So my active experimentation is done. We are ready that after the program, what they will do, we are ready with that. Now we'll go to concrete experience. Now in concrete experience, what we intended to do was we wanted to create a program which should not be like a one-sided way of 4 hours of theory, 4 hours of practical. So this is what we did. So again, I'll use a kind of a line. So what we did here was week 1, it's all what we did was intro. So introduction to businesses, introduction to processes, introduction to policies, the products, whichever we want to look at. We thought about that will be our week 1. So the first 5 days we complete their induction, we complete their HR processes, we complete their documentation, and then we go to the business, whichever business we are looking at, they should be going for. So their product and processes. We completed the process in week 1. Week 2, we looked at behavior. So anything related to their behaviorology in their profile, what kind of behavior programs can we do? So one day we did a motivation. Okay, now we went on from week 2. So week 3, now I'm going to do a little bit like this. So from week 3 to week 5, it's a business training. When I say business training, it is basically target versus actual. So the process they were supposed to go, we got a target from them, and then we started, the trainer started to work with them so that they achieve their target. So first 4 hours, how to achieve that target, what are the methods of achieving that target, what are the practices they should do to achieve the target, and on the second half, they used to do actual calling, or they used to do actual sales, or they used to go ahead and do whatever they're supposed to do, and then we used to have a target. So week 3 to week 5, all these things put together, we are looking into an aspect of this 3 to 5 business training. So in that business training, we are looking versus target versus actual. And then on week 6, we used to publish scores. And we used to create an R&R out there. We used to give certificates for the best or the top people who are there. And we used to give the trainer also kind of a trophy, the trainer whose batch has done the best amount of report, and creating from that. And week 7 is where the graduation ceremony, we went ahead and we congratulated the best learners with a certificate, and they used to get deployed. Now, if you look at this concrete experience thoroughly, okay, this is typically a place where we are looking from a perspective of how they will go through this program. From there, on week 7, now these are the things that will happen in week 7. Now pay attention. So there will be a transfer document, which is more from a perspective of, if we can make a recall from the model, that is reflective observation. So a transfer document will have the entire genesis of reflective observation. What is the trader's observation? What is the business's observation? What is the ideology of this person? What is the thought process of this person? What was the person's score? How did he perform during those 7 weeks? How did that person do in the behavioral program, in the personality assessment, in the business training? What is his target achievement? Everything put in the transfer document. What we are doing, we are creating something called as reflective observation. So whatever happened and we understood from the document, and we created a transfer document. Two, we created something called as deployment document. Now, typically, as the hiring happens based on the need by the businesses, so we initially did a deployment analysis, and then we created. So it's like during the training, when the business review used to happen, in that entire business review, we used to go back and ask, okay, these are the guys who are the best, they're doing good in your processes and products. They're doing good in their target versus actual. So you have to have a discussion. So in the deployment document, everything is to be getting observed, getting documented. This is what the process he will go through. We used to give a rundown. So the team leader used to come in. So let's say out of 25 people, 5 were going to group A. So the team leader of group A used to come and, get into that kind of a notion where he and she will let them know that this is what is happening. We have to create a grand welcome for that product process or that person to going to that particular product. And the third part was the learner and trainer scorecard. So if you look at the entire things, we have come to, the reflective observation. And this entire part, the concrete experience, the week 7 transfer document, we created both together. Now comes our reflective observation or abstract conceptualization. Now what happens here is, in abstract conceptualization, we see what worked, what went well, and finally, what could have been better. So the point that I'm trying to make it, if I again go back to the entire one, so we started off from the entire thought process of everything, and then we went back to our way of understanding the entire process. So the ideology wise, now what is left is the reflective observation. So, the way we created it, the processes. So now if we talk about now, why am I talking about reflective observation at the last? Because it is happening during the process. So the first time it is happening about learner. Second, it is happening during training. The third is happening from the scorecard. And when all these things put together, as we started from active experimentation. We again go back to active experimentation once again. Again, we go back to what do we do here? Outcome. In the sense, how many people got certified? What is the high score of the batch? 2 trainer versus trainer. Who is the best among all? Reward them. And finally, learner application plan. So see, we started from active experimentation and we ending at active experimentation. So if I can do a quick recall, we were looking at like a problem statement given to us, need to create a training program where we can reduce attrition, we can create an impact measurement. So we created some focus group understanding and discussions. We went ahead and created a kind of a focus group with an MOM format, with the review format, the new program or the modified. Okay, by the way, we didn't create any new program. We just modified the existing program. 45 days there. The entire timeline we figured out to be around 7 weeks, because the entire thing and the impact measurement prior to business and post to business will take another 90 days. So we're looking at 7 weeks, but typically come to 1.5 months, which is 45 days. So 45 days of planning, 45 days of training, which is 90 days, plus another 90 days, which is 180 days. The entire thing planned out. Then we went for active experimentation, where we talked about learner objectives, learner experience design, training methodology, program design, activity list, target format. Then we went for concrete experience, where we divided the entire thing into week. What will happen to a learner? Week 1, they're going for introduction. Week 2, behavioral programs. Week 3 to 5, business training, target versus actual. Week 6, publishing scores. Week 7, graduation. 3 things for this is transfer document, deployment document, and learner or trainer scorecard. Then we are getting into abstract conceptualization, what worked, what went well, what could have been better. Again, on a reflective observation from a learner perspective, from during the training and the scorecards. And finally, coming back again to active experimentation is whether the outcome matched or not. Whether the trainer versus trainer rewards and recognition worked or not. And then what's the final learner and application plan. I know, it took me 6 months to plan the entire thing, and the execution took me over a year. I'm trying to put it in a practice framework of around 25 to 30 minutes. But yeah, we are available. You can just write us back to the channel and we can come with a conclusion. However, the first batch, we started in the month around October, and it gave us a tremendous results from an impact measurement. Of those entire batch, it was retained for a period of 18 months with proper R&R. And we started also giving rewards and recognitions to the trainer. So team, if you are a L&D manager, if you're a training manager, if you are a L&D head, if you have to design a program based on Kolb's model, I just gave you a limelight. All the best. Keep implementing. Thank you for listening.